Hello, and welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I am Midge Munster. And Penny, today I am going to nerd out a little bit because this week we are getting Scream 5, and I am beside myself.
Ooh, snap, it's Scream Watch 2022.
Scream Watch! This is just one of my all-time favorite horror franchises, and I couldn't let the opportunity pass for us to talk about it since we've got a new one coming out. It turned 25 last year in 2021, which is like really crazy to think about, first of all.
That's a long-running franchise.
It is. And so, yeah, I'm just going to chat a little bit about the history of Scream, why it's had such a huge impact on the horror scene and us as like a film culture. And then, of course, we can just, shoot the shit a little bit here after that.
Yeah, tell me all about it.
So, Scream. So it was written by Kevin Williamson, and if you haven't ever seen the backstory on this, it's really fascinating. He actually wrote this script after having a somewhat Scream-like experience, definitely not to the level of, actually being Mordored or anything.
Well, he did write it after, so I guess he was okay.
He was not unalived in the process, correct? But he was watching like live coverage on the news of a serial killer like that was loose in his area, basically. And he was, chilling at home watching this and noticed that there was a window open in his house that he didn't remember opening. And he had this very like real moment of panic, and he called a friend and was walking around his house, as you do, holding a butcher knife, like scanning the house. We've all done this, right? Like I've definitely like grabbed something out of the bathroom and like walked around, jumping around corners. But his friend and him eventually kind of, he settles down, realizes there's nobody in their house. And they start talking about the movies that made us, like these boogeymen, Freddy, Jason, Michael, and how interesting it would be now having the knowledge of the killer trope to be in that same situation with the knowledge of horror films. And so this is where he gets the idea to write what is at the time titled Scary Movie.
Yeah.
And he writes the script and puts it out to, bunches of studios. People are bidding on it, what have you. And actually a lot of studios wanted the script, but they had a lot of trouble finding somebody to direct it. And they put it up to Wes Craven multiple times and he turned it down.
He's like, nah.
Yeah. And at that time he had just had, I think, what is that movie called? It's a vampire film. He had just put that out and it was a flop, unfortunately. Yeah. And so Craven was really trying to like separate himself from the horror genre at that point and prove that he could do other things. And it ended up being one of his assistant who read the script and kept kind of just casually throughout the week being like, I've heard they're really having trouble finding somebody to direct Scary Movie, and they're really hoping it'll be you. And he's like, well, tell them to make me an offer I can't refuse. And so they came back and they did, and Wes Craven signed on to direct it, which of course ends up being like one of the main reasons that this film goes as far as it does.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, so the big thing, of course, that you have to talk about with Scream is that the whole premise of it is that it completely, well, not completely, but it subverts the horror genre in so many different ways while also adhering to a lot of the tropes to give us this really interesting thing that has never been done before at this point. We're in the 90s. The kind of height of the slasher has kind of petered out after, the 80s with Nightmare and after John Carpenter's Halloween. Like everything's kind of been played out at this point. People are getting tired of the genre. And when Williamson writes this script, it's both effective as horror and comedy, and it's jam-packed with all these references for the horror fan. Like, it's really just uh especially, you can enjoy it if you're not a horror person, of course. But like Linda Blair from The Exorcist makes an appearance, and like Wes Craven shows up at one point as a janitor named Fred, which is, if you know, you know. uh and it's just smart. It's freaking smart. And of course, one of the best ways they do this is through the character Randy Meeks, who is like the horror obsessed video clerk character. And the one of the most iconic scenes in Scream, we are at the party. It's the last scene in the film, which I actually found this out recently. I did not know this. Took 22 days to shoot.
Ooh.
Like 22 days.
Just blazed right through there.
And it's a long scene, but it's not a long scene, and the stakes in that scene, to be in that space for 22 days, I just can't even. Whew. Big round of applause for all of those actors. But Randy, they're at the party, and Randy pauses John Carpenter's Halloween, which is playing on the TV, which is so funny, to give this speech about how to survive a horror movie, which is like one of the most iconic scenes, where it's the first time that I think really these tropes have ever been called out in a list like this, where it's like, don't have sex, don't say you'll be right back. And then, of course, immediately these tropes are subverted, because we cut right to a scene of Sydney post-coitus with a person who ends up being our killer, one of them. And Stu, says, I'll be right back. It's absolutely brilliant. It's so, so smart. And they have this real whodunit aspect. That's a thing through the entire Scream franchise. We're playing who is this killer, which was really new, because even, mass killer, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, we still know who they are.
Yeah.
Scream is the first time we really don't know. Like, anyone can be behind the mask. So overall, it's just, to me, it's just so brilliant. It's smart, it's funny, and one of my favorite lines in the movie, I guess I should have said at the beginning, if you haven't seen Scream, this episode is full of spoilers, but I'm assuming if you're listening to it, it's because you're a Scream fan. But of course, at the end, we end up finding out that there are two killers, which is another way we're subverting the genre. And they actually die, which is unheard of. But Billy, in that last scene, says, movies don't create psychos, movies make psychos more creative. And I love that line, because it, again, is playing off this thing that parents say. It's the same thing people say now with like video games make kids more violent. Like, in the movie that you're watching, they're undercutting the genre. It's just smart and brilliant and fun. But yeah, so that's, I feel like I've rambled now for 8 minutes about how much I love this genre, and I have more things to talk about, but I guess I would love to know, have you seen Scream? I actually don't know.
Well, yeah, so I've seen the original Scream. I haven't seen the rest of them.
That's okay. I will say, I like the sequels of them. I think 4 is my favorite right now. Mm-hmm. But none of them quite did it like the original. I'm glad you've seen it, because I know horror isn't always your thing.
Yeah, so this was definitely one I was kind of laughing to myself when you were talking about like how it's effective as both comedy and horror, because I was definitely convinced to watch this by a friend who told me that it wasn't scary, it was like funny scary. And then we watched it, and she was like, I forgot how scary it is, because we were like, oh no, this is legitimately scary.
And that's what's so good about it too. Like, it has you laughing one minute, and then the next minute you're like truly terrified. And
I enjoyed it. It was one of the most terrifying real life portion of it was halfway through watching it. We were living on the second floor of a duplex at this time, and I was like, did you ever shut the front door? Because
Oh
she would
God.
sometimes leave the front door open so that her cat could look out. And so we both just like stared at each other and we're like, one of us has to go down these stairs and lock this door. And very terrifying. I definitely like one of us stood at the top to watch while the other one like bolted down to
Did the other one say, "I'll be right back"?
right. It was very scary, but yeah, I thought it was a really cool movie. I mean, I feel like I didn't necessarily pick up on all of the horror references in it when I watched it, so it would be interesting
Sure.
to watch it again because this was like kind of in the start of me watching more scary movies.
Sure.
But yeah, it was definitely funny. I mean, I love Matthew Lillard. He's
Oh my gosh.
amazing. So
The
always,
cast is just jam-packed with all-star actors too.
yes, I loved Courtney Cox. What's her name? Gail Weathers.
Gail Weathers
I
is
love
just
Gail
an
Weathers.
absolute and iconic character. And that movie, I'm sure most of you know, is actually how her and David Arquette met, and that's how they ended up becoming married later down the line. Which I just think is cute. Even though they didn't work out, they still have a very amicable relationship, with it, which is great. I did want to mention, while we're talking about both horror tropes and big stars of the screen, Drew Barrymore.
Yes.
Is, first 13 minutes of the movie. I think it's around that mark. This was, again, smart marketing. Something Wes Craven and the team really wanted was, actually specifically Kevin Williamson too. I want to give him his credit, the writer, where it's due. They were very smart about playing this game with the audience even before the film came out. They wanted to make sure that they were constantly throwing people off the scent, more or less. And so Kevin Williamson really harkened back to like the Psycho. Oh my gosh, Janet Leigh.
Yeah.
They, put Drew Barrymore on the poster and were really pitching this as a Drew Barrymore film. Because they said they wanted to set up this experience where, she dies 13 minutes in and you've entered this movie thinking it's a Drew Barrymore movie.
Yeah.
And now it really sends the audience into this tizzy of, oh, anyone can die. And what the hell's going to happen now? And
that scene is so iconic.
It's so good. So good. And when I tell you that nothing makes me feel more nostalgic than a little thing of Jiffy Pop because of that opening scene. I have Jiffy Pop every time I watch Scream. Every single time.
The product placement.
It's, I will say too, like as far as tying back into the quote about it makes killers or psychos more creative. I think Scream also has some of the most creative kills, which isn't something I should be like proud to say that I'm like, ooh, creative kills, exciting. Yeah. Rose McGowan, Tatum in that garage door is one of the best horror scenes ever to me. I think about it constantly.
Oh my God. True story, I was scared of garage doors growing up, not knowing about that scene. So I'm glad I was not introduced to it until later in life, because I was just afraid that they were gonna come down and bonk me in the head and kill me. So
did you have a full-blown come apart during that scene?
It was extremely scary. I mean, I think part of it is because when I was growing up, one of our garage doors didn't have power. So you had to manually like push it up and down. And so like you could really feel how heavy they are.
Oh. Yeah, I think that it continued to be. I mean, even in the later sequels, there are just some really, which I guess, I don't know, I always have that moment where I'm like, who's coming up with this shit?
Right.
But I think I don't know, I've been reading a lot of I'm of course nerding out, gearing up for I bought my tickets to the Scream premiere on Friday, probably 2 months ago, a month and a half ago at least. And
gotta be ready.
So I've been, watching old interviews and all this, like nerding out, vamping up, getting ready to really enjoy it. And of course I'm starting my rewatch too. I'm binging. But the franchise was so smart in two ways, because like usually, right, let's say Friday the 13th, you kind of get the same film over and over with
Yeah.
different characters. Scream was so smart in that like Sydney's not really a final girl. I mean, she is, but the four characters survive the first film,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a legacy cast. Like those people are still going to be in Scream 5. Like Scream has characters and it has people you get attached to, and there's a real plot where you like have to almost sit and watch the other movies to know, not to know what's happening, but like to know the stories of these characters and why these things are happening. And it's just unlike anything else in the genre, and it really like it was a reawakening for horror of that type in the 90s, because then, you know, of course we get a lot of spin-offs. We get Scream Queens, we get all kinds of, you know, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like we get all these
Yeah.
new horror spin-off type. Scream really made a new subgenre of horror, I feel like. And I mean, not just I feel like, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
The Scream era is something totally different, and I love it so much. I'm just so excited to watch the new one.
Yes. Yeah, I know because we talked about it in this like slasher episode. We like kind of briefly touched on this idea of like this Scream era, and I do think like these kind of self-referential horror movies that are a little bit meta, a little bit aware of themselves, are just such a cool new kind of take on things, and I enjoy that. You know, usually more than kind of the straightforward of
Sure.
horror of the past.
Well, and I love too that they I mean, obviously it's January now, but like I love that they're releasing it in the winter. That was the original Scream released 5 days before Christmas, and it absolutely bombed the first week. And like all the actors were like, well, that's it. Like Wes Craven was like, I'm done. And I mean, everybody really thought it was going to be just another, you know, string of shitty B films that somebody comes along and like picks up in a blockbuster once in a blue moon. And it was really because of word of mouth that it went from, I think it made like 6 million, which is, you know, still a lot of money, but in this terms of box office is not a good opening week.
Yeah.
The first week, which granted, I think that if I had to guess, I also think that's because it was Christmas. Like, who's going to see horror at Christmas? But especially when the genre had died off a little bit. But I think it went from 6 million, and then like the next week it made like 35. Like it just all of a sudden caught. And Nev Campbell tells a really funny story about like all her agents called her at once, and she was like, oh my god, I'm being fired, it's happening. Like she thought that because it bombed so bad. Anyway, they said it made 30 million, and she was like, is that bad? She was, oh, go ahead.
Oh, this was unrelated. I wasn't sure if like something that I didn't realize until I listened to a podcast, I think, that was talking about this. I don't remember why, but just
not a podcast,
right? The ghost face mask.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that was like an existing mask. I had always assumed that it was created for the film.
This is actually a really interesting story. So they were location scouting for filming, and the like executive producer, I believe it was, she like saw they were touring this woman's house, and they went up to the second floor, and she had like what was presumably her son's room that like he didn't, you know, live there full time or live there anymore, or whatever. But that mask was in the room, and at the time had like a white shroud around it. But they saw it and they were like, oh, this is it. Like, this is the mask. And so they, you know, get it at like a 5 and dime store or whatever, and are planning to use it in the film. And the studio was really against it, like was really adamant, because it was already in existence and they didn't own that mask, that they wanted to create something else. So they went through several iterations. There was one that was kind of like a gargoyle type mask. They go through multiple different masks in tests, and finally Wes Craven like put his foot down and was like, no, we're using Ghostface, this is what we're doing. And it was kind of like a scandal because they couldn't capitalize on it. They didn't own the design, and people were really like butthurt about it. But I think it adds, because it's like literally, it's that thing of, it could have been anybody. You could literally go into a store and buy that mask. Anyone could pick it up and be under it, like it adds that extra layer. It's like he knew exactly what the hell he was doing. Wes Craven is brilliant. R.I.P. bud. That is also a weird thing. Yeah. This will be the first Scream film that is not directed by Wes Craven. And that's I'm glad that they're like doing it. Yeah. But it's very sad. And Wes Craven, like, such a one of my favorite. I found an interview with Kevin Williamson, the writer, talking about Wes Craven. Because this is the first film that's going to be directed without him, there's been a lot of course, commemorative, like very people reminiscing about him, honoring him in different ways. And Williamson said, this is his quote, "He would sit in his director's chair and be doing a crossword puzzle and reading about birds. And then all of a sudden he would call action and become somebody totally else. It was so bizarre." And there's like all these accounts of him being this like person who was very invested in like the Audubon Society. They had somebody from the Audubon Society like speak at his memorial and do bird calls. And like they would talk about like he would be out on the after shooting, all night. They shot almost exclusively at night, obviously.
Oh yeah.
And so they would shoot all night till like 6 a.m. And they said like they would look out their window and Wes would be out there like calling birds and taking pictures at 6 a.m. And I love that he's this like horror mastermind, and he was kind of a big softie. Like people talk about what just a great, kind human being he was. But he had this bizarre mind, and I find that just so fascinating. And I feel
like that's all of us, right?
Right.
Like, I feel like almost all of like kind of the great like horror creators and like spooky people are people who have, the ability to think of these wild and horrific things, but are like just a chill person underneath, and they know when to turn it on and turn it off.
Vincent Price was kind of a good example of that. But yeah, there was a lot of interesting. I got really deep in reading these, like I said, these interviews and things talking about him and just like the sets, like what it was like on set. Everyone was talking about how I guess David Arquette made like he called it David's Bar, and he made it in his hotel room because they're all staying in this hotel.
Yeah.
And they have all their windows like blacked out because they're all sleeping during the day to film in the evenings. But after they would get done shooting at like 6 a.m, they would all go to David's room, and he had bought, I guess, like every lava lamp he could find in town, all these like weird toys and tchotchkes and things that he hung from his ceiling, and created this entire bar experience in his room for the cast to come hang out in.
Oh, I want to go to David's Bar.
I know. David Arquette, what a gem. What an absolute gem. He's so Dewey is a character too that I think you can't help but fall in love with, and I'm really excited that he's one of the legacy cast and that we get to see him again pretty soon.
Oh yeah, what are your predictions / wishes for Scream 5?
Okay, this is a big ask, and I don't know that it's gonna happen. I'm getting giddy thinking about it. So there is a big like what's the word, conspiracy group who believes that Stu didn't die, Matthew Lillard's character. And he has been getting a lot of press this go around, which is great because he's amazing and we love Matthew Lillard, and obviously iconic first film like killer superstar. But it is weird because he has not been in the franchise since 97, right? So there are a lot of people who believe that he didn't ever, because he gets hit in the head with a TV.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't get like Billy gets like dead.
Yeah.
And Matthew Lillard himself has been like known to talk about this publicly. He's like, I don't think Stu's dead. That wouldn't. There's a great interview with him where he's like yelling about it, and he's like, I'll go throw a TV on my head right now. I won't die. And so that is my prediction / hope, is that Stu is going to make an appearance. I don't think he will necessarily be the killer, but I would love for Stu to show up in Scream 5. That would make my whole life. I also think, well, and if not that, I think that the killer will be somebody related to Stu somehow. Maybe. I don't know. What it'll be interesting to listen back to this after Friday. I don't know. I kind of feel like this has to be the end of the franchise.
Yeah.
A little bit, because like David Arquette's getting older. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like Nightmare, right? Like, again, gosh, this is just a spoilers episode. Spoiler for Nightmare on Elm Street 3 coming to you hot. Like, after they killed off Nancy, it was kind of like, okay, you know, like,
yeah, like, oh.
you can't really do it without your final girl. I mean, you can, but it's just never going to be as good. And Neve Campbell is going to age out of well, I say that, but let's look at Jamie Lee Curtis. So
right.
JK LOL. Yeah, I guess, yeah. Actually, screw me. Forget everything I just said. Neve Campbell, I saw a picture she did for the press tour. My friend sent it, and she said, Mommy? Sorry. Mommy? Sorry. Mommy? She'd be looking so good. But I don't know. I would kind of love for this to be the last one, which I think would have to mean killing Neve Campbell. But I don't want that per se, but also I kind of do, but I don't.
Yeah. We'll have to see. We'll find out on Friday.
Yes. Well, this has been really fun. I appreciate, again, that we always have a couple of these episodes, like the Haunted Mansion or the slashers, like where one of us is just a big nerd for something.
Yes.
And we really appreciate the other one for letting us fully go off. So if you are a Scream fan, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are not a Scream fan, I hope that this maybe made you want to either watch or rewatch the films from a new lens, maybe having more information about how they were made, how they were written. But let us know, always, as always, like, chat with us. Let us know what your thoughts are. Do you have tickets to Scream 5? I want to know.
Yeah, I'm feeling like maybe I want to watch Scream again now.
I want you to live tweet me the entire time.
Ooh, I can do that.
I did order some new, maybe we can post on the Ghouls Night in Pod Instagram page. I did buy some new big acrylic ghost face knife earrings to wear on Friday. I'm going to have a whole spooky Scream look prepared. Yes. So I'm very excited.
That will be delightful. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Scream fans and or non-fans alike. It's been great to chat with you, and I always love a nerdy one. I love hearing people talk about things that they're super into. So thank you for sharing your Scream love with me today, Midge.
Yay, my pleasure.
As Midge said, you can find us on Instagram at Ghouls Night in Pod to see photos about things that we talk about and just generally stay up to date on what we are doing. If you enjoy the podcast, please give us a like and a review on your podcast app of choice. Do we have a review to read today?
Ooh, we do have a new review.
Ooh, who's it from?
This is from Crossbar Ping. This was actually just a couple of days ago, so thank you for listening. And this is a 5-star review titled Great Spooky Fun. Looking for wishless guests for 22. How about Spike? from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, hell yeah.
If I could get James Marsters on this podcast, I would simply pass away.
Oh, I don't need what would I even say to him besides who allowed you to be so sexy?
So hot. But this, Angel versus Spike character compare contrast episode.
Ooh.
But it's actually a really fun. Are you a Buffy gal?
I have a Buffy tattoo.
Oh my god, you do! I knew that. I'm such a dummy. Yeah, we're both Buffy
is
fans.
Definitely on my list as a potential episode. So we will definitely be doing a Buffy episode at some point. And when we do, we will have to talk about the great Angel versus Spike debate.
Amazing. Well, there you go, Crossbar Ping. You're gonna get your wish. We're gonna do a Buff episode.
Heck yeah, you too could get your wish if you leave us a review on iTunes or anywhere else that accepts reviews. So thank you again for your review, my friend. And thank you all for listening. If you are looking for me, you can find me on all of the things at Penny Snark.
And you can find me at Midge Munster.
And until next time,
goodbye.